Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Teresa Murad, and I'm the Director of Education and Diversity Programs at the Ecological Society of America. I'm delighted to welcome everyone to this water cooler chat. And so for all who just joined again, please feel free to share your name and affiliation in the chat box. Okay. And this water cooler chat is actually a part of a bigger project called LENS, the Landscape Exchange Network for Social and Environmental Systems. Is supported by NSF and led by Principal Investigator Andrew Elmore, whom you'll meet in just a moment. So today we have a panel of wonderful early career and mid-career scientists who will share with us their journeys in environmental data science. And ESA is especially grateful to Dr. Sydney Record, who has been instrumental in developing this event. So without further ado, please welcome Sydney Record, who will introduce our panel and co-host today.
Hi there. Thank you so much, Teresa, for the introduction. And we'll be, our panelists will be just introducing each other as we enter in. My name is Sydney Record. I'm at the University of Maine. And I'm just going to step right in, and then we'll have everyone, my co-panelists will introduce themselves as they enter into the presentation. So today we're really thinking about how we might expand the ecological tent in terms of broadening participation with environmental data science. And we'll use a case study from the National Ecological Observatory Network to just show how powerful NEON can be with its open science mission, and also making ecology open for many different user groups. So something that I've thought of a lot in my career in ecology is just, how do we change the face of ecology? So just a little bit of background of where my positionality and where I'm coming from is I'm a Japanese American. My grandparents were both put into internment camps during World War II. And having been in the profession of ecology now, ever since I was an undergraduate student over 20 years ago, I have only, I think, ever once met someone older than me who's an ecologist who has the same Japanese American heritage and lived experience as my family. And I don't think I'm alone. I think there are a lot of people out there who might be starting out in ecology and, or even thinking about maybe ecology as being an interesting field to pursue for their career, who maybe don't see people who are ecologists who look like them, that they can relate to. And so I've been really interested in thinking about inclusion efforts in ecology and broadening participation. And many of you are probably aware of a lot of papers and social media and so forth that have come out in the past several years that have really recognized some of the challenges that people who don't look like the kind of historic or traditional ecologist of, maybe a particular type of person might feel in the field. And, this was really emphasized by movements such as Black Birders Week or Black Botanists Week that came out in response to, people having people essentially not feeling safe in the field because of their background and the way that they looked. And in thinking about this, in tandem as all of this was coming out on social media, and also hearing about incidences happening in Central Park with birding and so forth, I was also thinking about the context of work that I've been doing in my research group and also with the Harvard Forest Summer Research Program in ecology, where we've really been for many years now thinking about how we might just broaden the way that we approach ecology and recognize that people of different backgrounds, be it skin color or disabilities, might have challenges with actually getting into the field. And not just into the field per se of the discipline, but literally like outside collecting data. And so we've been thinking a lot through the Harvard Forest Summer Research Program in ecology about broadening the ecological mindset and in particular using environmental data science as another entry point for different people to get interested and excited about ecology. And it also goes hand in hand with really pushing the science forward, because we can do so much more when we start to look at issues, not just at a single site, but across space and across time. And oftentimes you need statistical modeling and biogeographic data to actually start to get at those kinds of questions. And you need those computational environmental data science skills. And so today I want to just highlight some really awesome work that some of my undergraduate collaborators at Bryn Mawr College, where I was formerly, and also at the University of Maine, have been doing in the context of the National Ecological Observatory Network. And I'm going to now hand it over to first Dr. Andrew Elmore, who is leading this really awesome effort that is to try and bring more social science data into the National Ecological Observatory Network, and that will provide some of the context for the work that Sam, Olivares-Mejia, and Dinesh Cheville-Saint have been doing to really build up land use information for the National Ecological Observatory Network. So, Andrew, do you want to go ahead, and don't hesitate to hammer me if I forget to advance the slides.
Great, thank you, Sydney. Yes, many of you know about the actually, you could go back to the one slide. The National Ecological Observatory Network has a network of environmentally distributed sites, and they're ideally posed or set up to be able to answer ecological questions, right? But a few years ago, a group of us got together and said, well, how do we broaden the group of users who are using NEON data? And we thought that one way to do that would be to start thinking about how NEON sites could be used to study socio-environmental systems. That is, the interactions between humans and the environment. And in particular, how do those interactions change along ecoclimatic gradients? The entry point for this really has to do with the Airborne Observation Platform, which is a remote sensing instrument that images these areas in red, these squares. And they incorporate a lot more of the landscape than you think of when you think of just a site, right? There's people living in these areas, they're working there, there's a diversity of land use. Next slide. So the Airborne Observation Platform, we could go into a lot of detail on this and talk about it. It's very compatible with remote sensing instruments that are put into space by NASA and the European Space Agency, for example. But it goes into more depth, it gives you more detail, and it can define the three-dimensional structure of the Earth's surface, including its vegetation and built environment. So there's lots of different ways in which we think we can use these data to study how humans interact with the environment. Next slide. So we created something called LENS, which is the Landscape Exchange Network for Socio-Environmental Systems. And LENS has three main working groups, or sort of areas of emphasis. The first one is to characterize the socio-environmental systems that are represented by those NEON sites, right? So that involves the way people are using the land, who's living there, the diversity of people, and their life histories, and importantly, what they care about, right? So this all comes from the point of view of orienting research around these NEON sites in a way that meets the needs of the people living there, in terms of the environmental outcomes that they seek. To do that, we have to engage stakeholders in each of these landscapes. And that's where we hope to bring in people who live there or live near there and have a vested interest in the environmental outcomes of each of the NEON sites. And then we want to develop research with those stakeholders and other scientists that meet those requirements and are of interest to the people who live there. And that's really one way you broaden the environmental, the ecological tent, or the environmental science tent, is to work on research that is of particular interest to a diverse group of people. So we have one paper out already, and we've run 2 workshops that include field trips, as you see in the photo here. And if you'd like to know more, you can click on this link down here or in the bottom right, or follow that website. The lensrcn.org is our website. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can sign up to attend one of our workshops. And we do usually have travel funding for people. So it's a great way to meet people who want to work in these landscapes and learn some new tools related to remote sensing. So thank you for my little plug about Lens. And of course, Lens is how I met Sydney and her colleagues. So so it's working, right? We're already starting to network and meet new people and learn about new research questions. So I'll pass it off to Sam.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sam. I am a recent graduate from Haverford College with a degree in environmental studies and biology. I first started working with Dr. Rickard at the Harvard Forest REU in ecology in the summer of 2021, where I started my research on spatially explicit land use histories of forested sites within Neon, which you heard a little bit about already. And I'm currently an SIP, or a scientist in the parks intern for the Sonoran Desert Inventory and Monitoring Network, specifically as a GIS assistant with the data management team. So I'm super interested in data, ecology, GIS, all that stuff. Next slide. So I'm going to be giving a general overview of my thesis work, which is surrounded on, again, spatially explicit land use histories. So the three main steps in my research included data collection, digitization, and then standardization, with the overall goal of creating shapefiles depicting land use and disturbance over time, since this is something that Neon didn't originally have. And so we wanted to provide this kind of data product for future researchers to use. Next slide. So in terms of data collection, we casted a pretty wide net, accessing different resources from open source archives, databases, looking into contacting specific site managers, and we got a lot of different data, which you can see some of those examples here from historical maps, shapefiles that covered a wider extent that we then clipped to the site boundaries, or just tabular data. And then we had to digitize all of that information. So next slide. So an example of this, we can click through, was digitizing aerial imagery. So we then transformed such aerial imagery onto the correct geographic coordinates. And then I would trace the land use boundaries depending on the different site, which would then result in our final product in those shapefiles, as you see at the very end of this slide. And then the next step was standardization. So you can go on to the next one. So standardization involved basically making sure that all of the different land use or disturbance types fit general categories that we preset in the beginning. And this was to just make sure that we were able to compare the different land use and disturbance types across different sites for future analysis. So just making sure everything was kind of in a similar format. Next slide. So the results of this research included, we can click through, 59 total shapefiles for 75% of the sites dating back to 1902. In terms of data origins, 73% of those were shapefiles found in open source databases, 22% of those were given by site contacts, and 14% were digitized from figures or aerial photographs. And most of that data came from, or was disturbance data, while only about 20% was land cover or land use data. So this kind of gives you a general overview of what kind of data I was able to find. And overall, we found, next slide, that there were several ecological community needs or things that we needed to improve within our community, which I found to be stronger data management practices for historic disturbance data, open data across research communities, and overall just an increase of collection of spatially explicit disturbance data as part of the routine data collection and land management process. So yeah, that's kind of just a general overview of my research. And next I'm going to pass it on to Denasia, who's going to go into some of her research. And yeah.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Denasia. I am a graduate from UMass Amherst, and I graduated with a biology degree. And now I am a NSF-funded research, post-bac researcher. And my research I'm doing is exploring the effects of land use on microbial diversity across Neon sites, specifically looking at distance from roads. Next slide. So In order to do that, I'm going to be using Neon's data product, microbial data product. And the reason I'm using that is because they use a standardized protocol throughout their sites. And a neat feature of that data product is that it includes pH, soil temperature, and soil moisture. And these are thought to also influence microbial diversity. And in order for me to, and onto the analysis part of, oh, not yet, backslide. For the analysis of the microbial data, I was using Clarichin's workflow, which helped me find I used the Shannon diversity and just combined all those. Next slide. So in order for me to know how far the sites are from roads, I need to map out where all the roads are. So the roads layers it was a project that was already underway by Arya Yu, who was a former lab member, and others in the record lab. So you download a Hillshade file from Neon and also the US Census Road National Hydrography Dataset streams and upload these into QGIS. And then after this, we would look at the hillshades to see if we see any unmarked roads and draw those in, and then cross-reference it in Google Earth to see if it's an actual road. Slide. So onto my results. So I showed, as you can see, distance from roads and diversity, and there's no significance. So that prompted me to look at other, such as pH and soil moisture and other things like that. Slide. So I looked at the invasive plants, or whether the presence of invasive plants affected diversity. And as you can see, it does affect diversity. It's slightly more diverse with the presence of invasive species. Next. So pH is a known indicator of affecting diversity, microbial diversity. And then my results just further supports that. Next slide, please. Oh, you could just click through this. So land disturbances, specifically roads, soil moisture, climate, they do not affect microbial diversity. And plants and pH was found, plants, specifically the presence or absence of plants, invasive plants, was found to affect diversity, microbial diversity, which was pretty cool. And that's pretty much it.
All right, thank you very much, Andrew, Sam, and Denisha. And I just want to highlight that once again, this is like some really awesome data science work. I think Sam and Denisha are very modest in the presentation of their research, but Denisha's basically hasn't even been in her post-baccalaureate position for a year and has been processing all of the bioinformatics for these genomic microbial data for all these NEON sites. And also the ability to have all these different measurements at the NEON sites enables us to look at all these different factors. And the work that Sam presented is basically an insane amount of digitization and working with spatial data. And this is all was done in Sam's undergraduate degree at Bryn Mawr, right, and Haverford. So this is just an inordinate amount of work. So I just want to applaud them and say thank you for being co-panelists with Andrew and I, because I'm just so honored. And then just thank our sponsors, the National Science Foundation, ESA, for the invite, and our institutions. And now we want to get to the fun part, which is any questions that folks have. So I'm going to stop the screen share. We can always return to the slides if we want to. but just open it up for questions. And as Teresa mentioned before, if you can use the raise hand function, it will just help us to keep things in order. And I can go ahead and call on people as they raise hands. So feel free to ask us anything, if it's about neon, if it's about lens, if it's about, you know, the different paths to how all of us have gotten to different places with environmental data science. Yes, and if I pronounce anyone's name in the chat incorrectly, please just apologize, correct me. Roberta.
Hello. I'm just kind of wondering, like, how you guys got into this kind of work, and like, what kind of things you learned that helped you out.
Okay, so I'm just going to repeat the question because the mic was light for me, so I want to make sure everyone heard. But the question was, how did everyone get into this type of work? And you know, kind of what was our pathway to kind of getting to this type of work? And would any of our panelists like to go there? Sam, Denisha, Andrew?
I can start off, I guess. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a recent graduate, and I started working with Dr. Record just from attending an office hour, and I kind of expressed interest in Dr. Record's work, and so she was like, oh, like take a class with me, like let's see how interested and like what your skill set is, and just so we can get to know each other a little bit better. And so I took a class with Dr. Record and ended up enjoying it a lot. It was in computational biology, which is something that I never really found myself too interested in before, because I was really scared of computers and data and just like computer science in general, because I thought that was never something that I could do. And then I ended up taking the course and just really enjoyed it. It was something that I found was super, super neat. And again, something I never would have done had it not been for just showing interest in the work and seeing how I could then kind of like step into that. So once I kind of tried it out a little bit, I then continued to take courses and then attended Harvard Forest Research REU in ecology with Dr. Record. And so that's where I kind of started that research and kind of gained some more skills, specifically in computer science, in biology, and then continued that research throughout my senior year, which then kind of led to all of this work. So kind of just, I would encourage folks to take that leap of faith in terms of trying something that you might not like be too inclined to do before, and you might not like it, you might like it, and it might turn into something great. So that's kind of what ended up happening with me. And yeah, just don't be scared of like trying stuff that like might daunt you just because it seems really hard, but you might end up being good at it and might like it. So that's I guess what I always tell people.
Well, thank you, Sam. That was very encouraging.
Let's see, Raimi.
Hi, so I'm a sophomore at Wofford right now, and I just started working in data science as a concentration along with my environmental major. And this is kind of a more general question, but I've been looking into grad school for data science just because I took a lot of GIS classes, which was interesting to see how y'all have used that. And I was just wondering, would there be a difference for going to like a data science graduate school and going to an environmental data science grad school? Like, I just don't know if there's something, should I look more into the environmental side because that's my field, or would the generalization of data science still work for me?
Andrew, do you want to take this one?
I'd be happy to.
Great.
I you know, every student I take on has a background in data science, because it's so important that we, you know, work with computers and be able to analyze data. You know, your general interest in ecology or environmental science, if that's really a passion for you, then I would say environmental data science. There are emerging programs in that area, and you could focus on that. If you go into a straight data science program, you'll be, you know, working with data sets that may not be your passion, and you probably don't feel quite as vested in that work. But I think in environmental data science, you should be challenged in data science completely. And I think you would find it very interesting. And we're using a lot of the same state-of-the-art algorithms and machine learning and all that that's being developed in other areas of data science. So I think that would be the best route. That's my personal opinion. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just echo what Andrew said, because the nice thing about data science is at the end of the day, things boil down to numbers and so forth. But if there are examples and contexts that are going to keep you more interested and excited as you're moving through a degree, if you have that kind of environmental passion, then it's nice when you can have those kind of all of those different roads meet.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's a question in the chat, Sydney. I don't know if you noticed that.
I don't. Do you want to go ahead and read it, Andrew?
Okay, it's the presence of invasive species had more effect on soil microbial community, and is this work published? So I think that question was for Denisha.
Okay, so okay, what do you mean by is this work published? Like if I publish my results already, I just need to
I
clarify
think
that.
you can interpret it that way, but
Okay. So no, I haven't published this right now. I'm expanding like the sites I've used. I want to encompass all of the NEON sites so I can have a better understanding on whether or not roads really don't have a effect on microbial diversity, but so far, yes, presence of invasive species does increase diversity. Hope that answers anything.
yeah, that's great. I could ask Sam a question. Sam, your work very much is in line with things that are interest to Lens, and I wondered if you had any lessons for us about reaching out to all those people at each site. You said that 20% of your data came directly from each site, and do you have any tips or sort of information about your experiences reaching out to those people and working with people at each of the sites?
Yeah, so definitely dependent on the site, and sometimes contacts were more responsive than others, which obviously has to do with like workload and just how stretched thin folks are versus how much time they have. But I did find that was definitely a useful way to collect the data, because a lot of the times the data, if it wasn't open source, it would kind of either be like hidden, or you would just have to ask the data managers specifically, and they would kind of lead you to different points. And so I did find that to be a good way to just develop those relationships and then just get more leads. Even if they didn't have the data themselves, they would always point me into a new direction. And so that was always helpful to just get an idea of like where their heads were at, because every different site is different, and they're all going to have very varied data management practices. And so it was a great way to kind of get a sense of each site specifically, and then, yeah, again, foster those relationships to further on the project. I don't know if that really answered your question, but hopefully it did.
It did, thanks.
Let's see, it looks like we have some hands up. So Kieran, would you like to go ahead? And once again, sorry if I mispronounce anyone's names, just feel free to correct me.
Yeah, no, you're all good. Thank you. I just wanted to ask, because you all were talking a little bit about like environmental justice, but I wanted to hear a little bit more about like where you see the intersection, or like where environmental data science can play a role in environmental justice.
It's a great question. Would any of the co-panelists like to tackle this one? I can go. Is anybody chomping at the bit to? Okay, so this is a great. So it and just Kieran, to follow up, is it specific to this project or environmental data science writ large, or both?
I feel like it'd be nice to hear maybe a little bit more about even just like the project, because I was interested in that too.
Yeah. So I mean, for the project, in terms of environmental justice, I mean, I feel like at the NEON sites, so just some historical context is that at the NEON sites, there was kind of an initial, notion that when they were building out the sites and envisioning the observatory, that there would be a whole land use and analysis package, like almost like a whole data products team at NEON that would be devoted to coming up with this kind of information on how people were using the land and intersections between society and kind of those ecological systems. And then, unfortunately, like many big projects, as the observatory was built out, it was just very expensive and there were budget cuts. And so that whole land use and analysis package didn't come to be. But many of the other data streams did. And so, I think a first step in terms of environmental justice and thinking about actionable science for the people writ large at these NEON sites is just identifying who the players are. And so we're hoping that some of this historical land use and current land use work that my research group and also that Lens is starting to do will help to start to fill that gap. But you're absolutely right that, keeping environmental justice in mind is integral to thinking about that work, so that we're not representing only land management, say by particular types of people or the dominant group of people, or we're not thinking about how these sites are connected to watersheds that influence people who aren't necessarily right at the exact footprint of the site. And so, I mean, and we're trying to be mindful of this as we go through. With the historical data, it's challenging because it's oftentimes, Sam didn't have this in her slides, but she's thought a lot about how, the way that we kind of collect data is through this kind of what a social scientist might call a snowball sampling design, where we like reach out to a site host and then they tell us names of other people or other data resources, but that ends up being filtered through the lens of that person and their perspective, and also just their network and connections. And that's one of the kind of key challenges of doing social environmental work, is that you're oftentimes dealing with networks of people that could be biased. So, in our first pass, we've just done this snowball sampling, but as I would like to continue building off the excellent efforts of Sam and Denisha and other researchers in my group to kind of try to be more expansive and inclusive as we build on that process. One thing that I would really love to be able to do would not just be thinking about kind of one challenge is that a lot of times when you go out and you're looking for that historic data in particular, you end up with kind of post-colonial information, just because that's like more recent, in time. And so you have more details on that. But I'm now have just recently moved to the University of Maine, and there's a great Wabanaki Center for Indigenous culture here, and I'm trying to have lots of coffee breaks with people from that center to kind of meet some folks who I could do some really meaningful work thinking about also kind of traditional ecological knowledge and how that's played out at these sites on kind of longer timescales and so forth. So, and that's, kind of adding in some of that environmental justice component, but it's definitely something that we're trying to keep, on our mind, so that whatever inferences we come up with aren't just jaded by maybe like the dominant group on these landscapes. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for asking it.
I also just wanted to add on a little bit to that. Because I think that not only is the project trying to kind of highlight or uncover these untold histories of the sites, but I also think that data science is just a really unique opportunity to make ecology a little bit more accessible. So for example, the summer program that I started this research at was meant to be an in-person program, but of course, due to the pandemic, it turned into a remote program. And data science is luckily one of those things that you can continue to do remote, and you don't have to go into the field. And so again, that can be a barrier for all sorts of people, whether that be financially or due to disabilities, or just not feeling comfortable within the environment in terms of being outside or anything. And so being able to kind of like choose your workspace and be able to run those models and continue to work on these types of things from the flexibility of like your own home or at your own pace is something that like I really enjoy about this work. And so I think that data science is a really cool way to kind of make just ecology and environmental science a little bit more accessible. Of course, there is that barrier of the technology and like having the like computers available to you, but that's also something that I think these programs are working towards in terms of making sure that this is something that many people can have access to.
Thanks, Karen, and thank you, Sam. Lorena, did you have a question?
Yes, I have questions both for student participants. So NEON has a lot of data, and you have showed an example of how you're using that NEON data for your own projects, but you're also designing projects that are giving you information back to NEON. And so I was wondering if you guys have reached out to them and shared the results of your research, and what did NEON say? Because I would think that they're very keen in learning more.
So I will follow up on this because I've recently been able to present some of the excellent work that Sam and Denisha, and not just Sam and Denisha, but there's a whole list of students who have worked on this land use project for several years now, because it takes a long time, as Sam was mentioning, kind of like reaching out to folks at the sites. You know, you sometimes reach out to someone and you hear back from them like 8 months later or something. So does take a long time. And Sam worked on this for 2 years almost, or a year, 2 years. Yeah. And so I recently had a chance to present this to NEON, and they were very excited about it. They are interested in setting up a whole technical working group just focused on this sort of stuff. So NEON is definitely aware that that there's the data sets provided can be like a lot more rich, and have much different interpretation and insights, and be more actionable if these kind of data exist. And yeah, the technical working group, I haven't said too much about it. It's kind of under wraps. So they're trying to get it through the bureaucracy there and so forth. But I think it's now getting far enough along where I can mention it in a public forum. But yeah, it would be, one of their twigs, which is, or technical working groups, which they have for all their other data products. But this would be almost kind of thinking about in advance of having a data product, how they can kind of be thinking about this kind of information at the sites. So I would say overall NEON's very interested, and many other NEON users and so forth that I've talked about it in various venues have been interested as well. And we're working as hard as we can to get our data layers out and stuff. We just gotta we want to standardize everything so you can do an analysis. People can have it for across the entire network, because right now we've got tons of awesome layers that Sam has started working on, and has started to standardize, and we just need to make sure they're all spatially aligned and so forth. And Denisha, you could speak a little bit to how your results were received at so we've also been interfacing not just with the NEON community, but Denisha, do you want to speak a little bit about presenting your work to the Long-Term Ecological Research Network last month?
Sure. So that one, it was good. I did get a lot of questions on mostly like how I wasn't able to put in our PowerPoint because time, but they're interested in more of how each site had different results, and different the different predictors change within sites. One might be more significant at the site, but significant at others. And also when I went to the emergent workshop, I was able to talk to someone who works at NEON specifically with the microbial data sets. and he was really interested in seeing how the data sets were being used, and he wanted me to like send my slides to him so he can present it to Neon to see, like, show that like these things are significant and are needed and are good, like good to have. But yeah, that's it.
That's great. Thank you both.
Teresa.
Hi, everybody. Thanks. I couldn't resist. So I had a question, actually more for along the lines of faculty who might be able to do this with students, because Sydney, you had mentioned that you were working with, Sam, I think when she was still in Bryn Mawr, right? So I was wondering if there were any tips that, this panel might have for educators who might want to try to implement this. What might be some of the things to look out for, or, things that you've enjoyed doing? And maybe from the point of view of students, what is it that, you found really helpful, I guess, in terms of having from a student experience working with faculty? So yeah, I thought that might be an interesting question for some of the people in the audience.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and provide a first step at the faculty experience, and then Andrew, feel free, and then Sam and Dinesh, we really want your perspectives too on this question. So I think we should all respond if we feel comfortable. But from a faculty perspective, I must say that it's I think that sometimes I would hear other faculty say like, oh, it's the data are too complex, your work must be too complex to do with undergraduates, because Bryn Mawr is an undergraduate only institution. It's also a women's college, and I never understood that, because I feel like students, especially if you can bring them over to the to the dark side, I always like to call it, computation and ecology. Maybe that's a bad way of phrasing it. I should have more positive connotation. But I mean, honestly, if you can get students excited about data science in their first year in their introductory coursework, and I should mention that Sam took her first course that she took with me was a course that I taught, which was an introductory course to computer science and an introductory course to biologists. So it was this like an intro course that could be an entry point either for computer science degrees or biology degrees at Bryn Mawr, and it was taught in Python. So if you're able to get students early on, then, and also if you're lucky enough to be able to hold on to them to work with you, in different classes and become your colleague and collaborator, as Sam and Denisha, have become to me, then a 4-year undergraduate degree is like the length of most PhDs, right? So so you can do all sorts of stuff, and I think that it's a little bit of a misnomer that sometimes people think that like undergraduate students can't do this computational work, because I think that in some ways, the right students are nimble and able to take on these skills just as quickly as a graduate student. And if you can get them interested early on in their degree, then they can really advance quite a bit, and I would say, Sam, you were doing like master's level work for your undergraduate thesis, and Tanisha, same, in the 9 months that we've been working together, it's just at such a high level. And so I think that's a bit of a misnomer sometimes when people think that, a student can't come in and just be a total rock star computationally. Andrew, do you want to speak a little to that, or should we skip over to Sam and Denisha, whichever you prefer?
I can add just a little bit. I personally now I'm in a program that we don't have an undergraduate program, so I don't have a lot of exposure with undergraduates. In a previous job I did, and I would agree with everything that Sydney said, that undergrads could come in and make big contributions. And I was very pleased when one of my students got a job at Google to start working on Google Earth Engine stuff. And it's great to see students get that spark of interest and take it where they want to go. The other thing I wanted to say was that NEON is just such an incredible resource because of the new data and the availability of free data. When teaching remote sensing for years, students would get excited about hyperspectral remote sensing and LiDAR, and I had very few opportunities to be able to give them a data set that matched their interest, and because it's so expensive to collect those data until NEON came along. And now we have it freely available. We can download the state-of-the-art in remote sensing data, and every student in the country from high school on up could be working with these data. And I think it's just a huge opportunity. So if you find that kind of stuff interesting, go to the NEON site and start downloading data. They've got a lot of tutorials. There's a lot of ways to get involved with the data at a very beginning level and work your way up.
Yeah, as a student, I feel like kind of echoing what y'all have already talked about, just like introducing it early. I think workshops and those intro courses, that one class that Dr. Record was talking about, where it was both an introductory comp sci course and a biology course, that made comp sci less like scary, I guess, to me, because it was biology. So like, okay, I know biology, I can do that. Like if it's an intro course in biology, like it should be fine. And so that kind of like introduces that seed into comp sci. And so I was like, okay, like I can also do that. That was really cool. And so merging those two together in that like one intro class made it easier for me to access it. And then just like having like R workshops or Python workshops. So it's just like little snippets of something. So it's not like a large commitment. So say there's like a weekend course, or you could just take like 3 courses or 3 like workshop classes, like 30 minutes or 45 minutes or something like that. Makes it easier to kind of approach it. And then you don't feel as, it's not as daunting to kind of approach something small